You're listening to A Creative Excuse. In this episode, I talked to owner, publisher, and editor of The Magazine based out of Santa Fe, New Mexico, Lauren Tresp. I started to get to know Lauren about 3 years ago when she took over The Magazine, and we share that in common in that I took over an arts magazine back in 2006, 2007 that I was working for at the time, and I was unable to make it work. It didn't last, whereas Lauren has found some success here, and I've really enjoyed getting to know her and seeing the way in which she's transformed the magazine, and it's really become an asset for Santa Fe and the arts community. Lauren gave me my first show as Echo Amano in their new space on West Alameda. That was such a gift. This is my first episode of A Creative Excuse, and the audio is not the best. Still learning how to record well in non-recording studio spaces. But thanks for bearing with me. Hope you enjoy it. All right, hello.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
You're my first victim.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
You haven't done any of these?
Yeah.
Cool.
I figured, you're someone who knows about words.
I know some words.
You know some words. You have a magazine with some words, and you've probably interviewed people before. So I thought I'd just get you first, and you can tell me how to do a good interview.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I'm the pro at that, but I can give you a review.
Yeah.
I'm good at reviewing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So what should I do to make this a good interview?
I would say, I listen to podcasts, and if I'm being totally honest, I don't always love it when people talk about themselves too much. Yeah.
The host or the guest? Or both?
Both. Definitely not the host.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's fine to, obviously people want to know who you are, but I've listened to some podcasts where the host kind of interjects their agenda into the interview, and that's definitely bad. And then as far as art podcasts go, I've listened to some where the host interviews an artist to talk about their work, and it's the most boring nonsense. It's just having someone talk about themselves doesn't seem that interesting. Of course, you're here to interview me, and I'll talk about what I'm doing. Yeah. But I think the questions that are so where are you from? How'd you get started? Real kind of biographical stuff, I'm not interested in. No. As a listener. Right.
I mean, what I'm interested in doing is learning about how you experienced your experiences rather than just the facts of the experience. I grew up here, but more what was that like for you?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Just one layer down.
Right.
Or a couple layers down, depending on who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that's kind of all we typically get in sort of the gallery chit chat when we're at an opening or something. It's oh, what are you doing now? I'm doing this. I'm doing this. But I think part of this podcast for me is really getting down into why do you do that? What does that do for you? How does that inspire you, and what are you getting out of it?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And getting to a personal level where it's not all the little sound bites that sound good,
right.
But what does your work really do for you? Maybe that's not a place you go with a lot of people, but it makes for an interesting story.
It does, and I think I'm better at that one-on-one. When I'm at a party or an opening or a group, I generally get a little overwhelmed by how many people are there, because there's generally a lot of people I would like to talk to. But then I'll sit down with one person and I'm oh, but what about all these other people I want to talk to also?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is, I think, for me, just a great opportunity to just talk to people I want to be friends with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And cool people doing cool stuff.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, this is I think, so about creativity, a lot of people.
What's the name of this podcast?
An excuse to talk to creative people.
Oh, okay.
I was straightforward.
I didn't even know what I was doing.
Now you know. Yeah, when it was straightforward, it is what it is. It's an excuse for me to talk to creative people. I'm interested in just the background of creativity. I think it's something that I think other people will be interested in, like what moves you, what inspires you, what blocks you up, what moves you through that kind of thing. So that's kind of what I'm interested in.
That's an interesting place for me to start because I don't really consider myself to be a creative person. And I know that that's probably false. And a lot of people tell me that that is false because what we do with the magazine, obviously there's some creativity involved, but I've never thought of myself that way. I still don't.
Really?
I see myself as operating around other people's creativity and I'm okay with that. Like, I'd rather be there.
But you're creating something in the world.
Yeah, we're creating. Like, there is a creative element, but I don't like the pressure of creating my own inventions. I'd rather frame other people's work.
Yeah.
And do that in a creative way or in an effective way that maybe takes some creativity to come up with. But it's been all my life. Like, I really wanted to be a film editor in college. That's what I wanted. That's what I went to college for. I was going to go into film and edit other people's movies. I didn't want to write movies or direct movies, but I really liked the idea of like really getting into the material and shaping it, contributing that way.
I feel really similarly. I went to school for art, but really found myself in positions where I was presenting other people's work, you know, either through galleries or nonprofit or whatever. It was, I really found I got a lot of joy out of setting the stage, you know. But I do see that as creative work. I feel like that, like, I look at creativity as like a really broad definition. Just like I think we're all creating. Every human is creating, and we're like either make bad creations, we make good creations, conscious creations, unconscious creations, right?
That's true.
But I think maybe that's a sort of difference. Do you see that between like art and creativity, or are they linked for you? I
mean, design is obviously very creative, but I don't think of it as art at all. And I think more of what the magazine is about design. And it happens to be an art magazine, so there's that element. But I think the design part is that you're putting the creativity to use. That's more utilitarian than poetic. And there might be some poetry in there, just like with design. You might reach a status of being artwork, but that's not the intention. And I don't know, I think that's probably a contentious thing for designers. They're like, what we do is art. But
I've heard the same thing from designers too, though.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of has their own sort of take on it.
But artists can end up in the same position. Artists can make work for utilitarian purposes, even just making a dime, and then it's no longer artwork, even though it's a two-dimensional object. It actually ends up becoming something else. It loses that poetry. So I think it's tenuous.
What do you think about like craft, like you said, utilitarian? Like, what about like a potter that's making something that's actually like you use? How does that fit in for you?
I kind of feel the same way. I think that craft, which has roots in design and use, can transcend those definitions based on what the maker or artist is putting into the work. So I think it really depends. And I don't know if fixating on definition serves too much of a purpose. Really, because that can be different things for different people. Maybe what I see as only utilitarian for someone else speaks more broadly and more substantially, conceptually.
Do you think that that's useful, is to like come up with definitions for these things, or?
I mean, I'm a writer. So I like definitions and words, but I guess that's also why we need writers all the time, because that conversation can change over time.
Right.
And you can write about the same piece over and over again and have different interpretations and different understandings. And whether that's from writer to writer or throughout time, that those meanings can change, I think it's important to keep the conversation going and allow it to be fluid. I think for a long time there was this idea, and maybe in a lot of places there still is, that like an art writer or even a curator writing about something is like the final word on the topic. And that's a static unfortunate end to a story that can go on and be reinterpreted and kind of live its life, whatever that object or artwork is. Through multiple perspectives.
Because it's like created in response to a person's experience or the time and that they're living, and that changes, right? Like it depends, like if you look at a work that was made in 1960 and look at it now, the context in which you're viewing it kind of shapes how you read it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And who are we to say that original context is the right one? And the object has many lives. And I think, we could get into like contentious artworks that are taught in art history classes that depict rape scenes. And that had a perfectly acceptable context at one point. Well, it no longer is. And how do we talk about that? And should it still be taught? There's arguments on both sides that make sense to me. This happened kind of after I left college, but there's all these things I hear about students kind of rebelling against those conversations because they're triggering, and that's important. That shouldn't be ignored. But it also, to me, doesn't mean the conversation shouldn't be had. I think as difficult as it is to talk about some of these things, we learn from them, and they are important facts relevant to humanity's creations. Right. So it's important to understand how to contextualize those things. But I'm sure it's a difficult conversation for a lot of people. Totally. Yeah.
It kind of makes me think a little bit of like the relationship of artist and critic. Like, I think sometimes about how, and what an artist can be putting out there is such a vulnerable thing, right? It's like they're working on some idea all their life, and they, or however long they're doing it, and then they put it on the wall, and it's like they're burying their soul. If they're being honest and whatever. And then for a critic, sometimes it might be easier to come in and sort of tear them a new one or whatever. I'm not saying your critics do that, but I've seen that kind of criticism exists, right? And it's kind of like do you cut somebody some slack? Are you sensitive to that? How do you approach that kind of thing?
I think the way I love talking about this. I love criticism, and I love writing about art and thinking about art, obviously. And I think the way I think about criticism for us, for this community, and I think it can be very different in other communities, is that even if there is what someone might call a negative criticism can be positive and negative, but if there is that negative feedback, it's because there's something meaty there to discuss to begin with. If we, and I mean kind of our team, our writers, if I may speak for them, if we feel like a work or a show has absolutely no redeeming value, we're not going to bother tearing it apart. There's no point in that. Right. So it's the work that's like on the cusp of something. That's what we want to talk about. And how is it on the cusp, and why is it not all the way there? What little step, or sometimes big step, but what is this next step that's going to take it to the next level? Right. So it's something that has a lot of potential, that just needs that extra little push, extra little piece of feedback. Right. And I also think in terms of like cutting an artist slack or something like that, like it's not personal. And if you've created something and you've put it out in the world, you should get that feedback. And maybe you haven't asked for it explicitly, but by putting it out in the world, you kind of are asking for it in some way.
Well, and by reviewing it, I mean, you're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
You're saying, like, this is worth talking about.
It's worth talking about. For better or worse for the artist, maybe.
Right.
Because I know, we get hate mail all the time to the magazine. Oh, your cover was hideous. And it hurts every time. I mean, I think I'm getting better at it with a little thicker skin, but it's like a little jab, and you got to swallow it, and you got to be like, okay, how do I weigh this feedback? Because that matters too. If you get a negative review about something, who's writing it? What's their background? What's informing their perspective? What are they taking into consideration?
Right.
Those are all good questions to ask yourself or ask them directly. And every review, it's just one person engaging with something that they see as valuable to engage with.
Right.
I think it's amazing. I think there should be more of it kind of in all ways. Like as a business owner, I'm working with a business coach because she can give me feedback and be like, this is where you need to look. This is what you need to work on. I don't know, this is such a lame analogy, but like the world's best athletes, they have coaches.
Right.
No one's above it. Even like our greatest achievers get that. So I think the role of criticism is to support and propel and be honestly, just be honest. And that's probably the most, the highest calling, the most respectful way to deal with art is to be honest about it. And okay, so that's one part. Another part is for me, like, what does this audience need to talk about in our little corner of the world, corner of the art world? Some things are more relevant than others. And what conversations need to be had rather than just could be had. I think that weighs into it as well.
What needs to be talked about right now? I think maybe it's a bigger conversation, and I don't want to ruffle too many feathers, but I don't think, at least in Santa Fe, I don't feel like we're in a very experimental or progressive art community. And I think a lot of people would be like, what is she saying? But I don't see anything radical. I don't see a lot that is guerrilla. I don't feel like maybe there's enough support for that. And if there was, maybe it would happen. But I also think institutional support and commercial support almost is maybe the reason why it's not happening. But maybe this community is so fixated on our gallery scene or our many museums, which are all wonderful. We want all of that. But I think maybe we're not allowing that breathing room for the more crazy things to happen. And I think there's an energy here that is percolating, but it hasn't kind of evolved or flowered into something truly progressive. Well, I mean, that kind of stuff generally doesn't happen in an institutional setting, right?
Right.
Like, they're usually averse
Yes.
to that sort of art, right?
Yes. And why do you think that is?
Money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they want money. They need fundraising. And, donors aren't necessarily going to give money if they think what the institution's doing is too out there, you know? So, I mean, I wonder if is it a matter of, like, shyness? Like, are the artists that are here just like, I mean, because you could go out in the street and, like, throw pudding at cars and, like, scream, you know what I mean? Like, you could do weird performance art anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think maybe part of it is financial in that I don't know exactly where artists could go to, like, get a cheap warehouse space and throw a show together. Maybe we had Siler for a minute, but not anymore since Meow Wolf moved in. The prices around town are pretty prohibitive for things like that. It's funny, the reporter, this is a month or so ago, I don't know, a few months, they did an article on like the emerging art scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all the people we already all know,
Mm-hmm.
because that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And yay for them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
mm-hmm.
there should be more than one article's worth going on here that's
mm-hmm.
under the radar and experimental and progressive, for lack of better words.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe in Albuquerque there's more space for it because space is cheaper. There's less pressure to be showing in a gallery because there aren't really any.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a good side and a bad side to that, of course.
Right.
But I think there's a little more creative freedom because there isn't that pressure to fit a mold
Mm-hmm.
of success.
Right.
And I think, the people who are able to donate and are able to fund artists generally are not interested in this really kind of on the outskirts kind of work.
Yeah. I mean, I think we really need those kinds of artists because it's like whether or not, typically those aren't the artists that get the recognition, but they sort of show us what the edges are,
Mm-hmm.
they show us what's possible and how far you can take something. And I wonder, like, is the city even conducive to that kind of work? I mean, in general, up until recently, most young people weren't really interested in moving here, and that's usually where that kind of comes from, is the younger audience, the younger artists, And it's a small town. It's just, there's not a lot of people here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution is for cultivating more of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that with this sort of influx of young people and there are more kind of collectives and pop-ups than when I first moved here, which was about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So maybe we're on the cusp of something.
Maybe we're just slow. Maybe Santa Fe is just slow.
We are. We're definitely
We're definitely slow.
But I think it's something that should be talked about, at least.
Yeah.
And, I think made space for.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, the magazine is looking at more than just Santa Fe, which I think is great because we are such a small town.
Yeah.
And Albuquerque's 3-4 times bigger, something like that.
More, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd love to know more about what's going on in other parts of New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to get out very much.
Yeah.
But that's one of my goals for the this coming year.
Mm-hmm.
And try to engage more different populations statewide.
Yeah.
We did this call for artists at the end of 2018.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, so we had over 450 submissions, and a ton of them I didn't know at all, which was great. We learned a lot about artists that are out there. But there was 60% of the people who submitted were white. Mm-hmm. 60% of them were over the age of 65. So it tells us a lot about who we're reaching,
right,
and who's out there, and who we need to start to reach more and invite in and have writing for us. And most of our writers are white as well. Mm-hmm. And I think having more writers of color, more writers from across the state contributing narratives that aren't already the familiar Santa Fe narratives is really important to us. So it's something that we're slowly starting to work on, and hopefully next year for this call we'll have a different demographic at the end of it.
Do you feel like it's enough to sort of match the demographic of the state in general, or do you feel like you need to shift that into a broader sense of what you want to see in terms of voices and inclusivity? I guess what I mean is in terms of percentages, the entries that you got, did that match the populations in New Mexico?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It probably did. I'm not sure. Well, it probably matched Santa Fe, not the rest of the state. We kind of have to walk this line of, as a journalistic enterprise responding to what's around us.
Right.
Versus, actually controlling that narrative. And this issue, actually, this 12 New Mexico artists issue is sort of the first time that we've actually created the narrative. We're usually responding to and writing about what other people are doing. So I think it's going to be an ongoing practice of exploring what those different modes can be. And I think it really means having more people on our team. Yeah. So we have an open call on our site for writers, and anytime anyone wants to email us anything, they're welcome to do so. We read it all. Yeah. Just because we're so small, we can't have our eyes everywhere, and certainly can't embody every interpretation. And it's just, diversity is so important, and being able to include more people and invite more people in, so that we can better reflect what's going on, at least in the arts community.
Yeah, I think it's funny because as much as like it's a common thing to have like the lists of things in magazines, the 12 this or that. I mean, it is kind of a bold statement, to say these are the 12 artists that you need to look at.
It is pretty bold.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly was a little nervous about it because, again, I don't see myself as the creative person creating this narrative. And we didn't frame it at all. I deliberately did not want to say these are the best artists or the most important artists. Like, these are just 12 artists to know now. That's literally it.
Right.
And it could have been 12 different artists, like 10 times over. We had so many great submissions. So it's not like, this is the be-all, end-all call that the magazine is making.
Right.
And next year it might look totally different.
You're going to do it each year?
Yeah. It'll be an annual thing. Yeah.
That's great.
So it's cool. It's cool to take a stance and get behind these artists. A lot of them are emerging, and a lot of them are totally new to us. So it's been cool to share their work and give them that platform and be in the show here. And they're all excited about it. And it's great that all of them are so lovely and easy to work with. So it's been all really good.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
you were gracious enough to give me my first exhibition in your space as Hecho a Mano. Which was so wonderful to have that opportunity. Starting new things is nerve-wracking. I mean, we were talking about vulnerability. Like, even this podcast for me is like, I can sometimes hide behind the fact that I'm presenting other people's work, And sure, there's like my stamp is on it based on what I select and choose to show. But like with something like this, I'm actually like using my own words. And even though I'm not like making a piece of art, I still feel a little like, oh, when I'm going to get my first hate mail for some stupid thing that I said on the podcast,
Oh yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Get used to it.
Yeah.
It happens all the time in the magazine. Even really stupid stuff. Like, I didn't like the color you chose. Like, all right, why are you emailing me this?
Right.
And it is a vulnerable thing to create something and put it out into the world for everyone.
Yeah.
And some people just do it, I think, more publicly and with more opportunity for feedback than others.
Right.
But I think it's so important to have that transparency and that two-way communication. Because, again, if you're not getting feedback and you're not getting people to engage and respond, you might as well just put it out in your bedroom and that's it. It doesn't matter if there's not a two-way street. Right.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm making more of a priority in my new work is putting the focus on relationships. When in the last gallery I was at, there was so much admin, there was so much like desk work and just constant like emailing, sitting in front of a computer all day. And I was finding I was really missing just the one-on-one, just the interacting with people. I think that's the reason why I'm doing this podcast. It's a reason why I want to do something smaller and more manageable. So I think about that in terms of the feedback loop, right? If we're just, sitting in front of a computer putting stuff out, it's you do it in your bedroom, or you're screaming into a vortex, or something like that.
And what's the point of being in like a
human,
a closed circuit?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like we're on this world and there's like a bunch of other humans around.
Yeah.
Might as well like develop relationships with people.
Yeah. I'm really interested in this. Like, I think the magazine, our ultimate goal is to create community and create those connections. And right now we do it through a printed magazine and through our website.
Yeah.
But there's so many other ways we can do that we're looking at exploring.
Like a podcast.
Maybe. Like a membership where people can actually meet each other and like have these conversations in person.
Right.
Low pressure, low stakes and fun. But what is the point of each of us kind of reading an article and then throwing it away? Yeah. Let's actually bring it to the next level.
Right. Like, it makes me think about hard copy and digital, and just like the difference between like having something tangible. Like, I think about, having a conversation with somebody in person versus, I don't know, texting back and forth or something. Like I guess just conveys another level of information. Why is it important for you to have a print magazine right now?
I think I love print. I prefer reading in print. If I have to really read an article that's online, I will print it off because I can remember it better. I really comprehend it better when I'm interacting with the object. So that's part of it. I think it's also like, if you're browsing the internet, it's whatever is there, or you have to go look for something, you have to Google something. If you're browsing through a print magazine, it's like, you might not have been looking for what's there. Yeah. And it's in front of you. And you can carry it around and come back to it and kind of linger maybe for a week, maybe for longer if it's sitting on your coffee table and you can flip through again. Oh yeah, I wanted to read that. Whereas digitally, it's like it's there and then it's gone. Right. And you have to either remember where you found it or Google it again, or it just leaves your brain and never comes back. So I think there's more staying power for sure with print. I also think it's a beautiful object. It's way bigger than the screen on your laptop. Most of us. Yeah. Not my giant monitor. It's way bigger than your phone. So you can actually see a whole layout of images, which is really important for an art magazine. Yeah. And there's a design element that you can't recreate digitally. Yeah. I think that's important. Yeah. I think it's also communal, specifically for, city and regional publishing. It's more of a communal experience because the people in your circles probably have read the same articles and you can talk about them together. Right. Whereas if you caught this blip, from Huffington Post or whatever, you don't know if anyone else read it. So there's not that same maybe inclination to have those conversations. Yeah, that's cool. I like that, thinking about it as a sort of community thing. Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of a touchstone for the community, I hope. Yeah, I was talking with Trisha English when she put out the hard copy of Unum, and she was just talking about how it felt real, which is interesting because she'd been doing it for a long time, for a while, and then you have this sort of hard copy thing, and then yet on the other hand, like, we are constantly engaging with this digital content, and like, it's making us insane. You know what I mean? Like, we read an article and we're like pissed all day, so it's like, has this real impact. But it is different to hold something, like I was saying, just that another level of information, like just having something tactile, and maybe just like our brains respond to it differently because it is physical. Yeah. And I think different media have different purposes. Like when you're texting with a friend, it's like, we're going to meet XYZ at this time. perfect medium for that. And then to actually have a conversation in person, way better medium. If you try to like have a conversation through text, it goes all wrong. So it's a similar thing. It's like, if you want to get the bullet points from BuzzFeed, you can do that on your phone. But if you want to dive into a studio visit interview, or see an array of images, it's a lot more rewarding in print. And I'm sure it's not true for everyone, but I think we strive to make the book itself something beautiful and a well-designed object that goes beyond what you can do with it digitally. And I think a lot of people are resonating with that.
Totally. I love it. You've been here, you own the magazine how long?
3 years.
3 years. And you were a writer before that, right?
I was, yeah.
And did you have any like experience with, or did you run a business before that?
Nope.
No. So you just dove right into it. I mean, that's daunting. We share that same experience. I also ran into the same situation where the old owner was like, "I'm done. Do you want to take this over?" Was that kind of similar?
Yeah. And the previous publisher, was really great. We spent a few months together during the transition and before the transition, where he was kind of showing me the ropes. But there is no way I possibly could have known what it was going to be like, even with that very thorough training. I don't think until you are a business owner that you could know that. How much work it's going to be, how many things you have to keep track of all the time. And I think particularly because we have to put out an issue on our schedule every month, there's no way to like scale it down, really. And I'm such a fool that I was like, I'm gonna do all these amazing things like right out of the gate, and was like, whoa, this is not gonna happen the way I wanted it to. And really had to put the brakes on. So I mean, I wouldn't give it up for anything. I have no regrets. It's amazing. And it's amazing to be fully committed to something and fully in charge, have creative freedom, and have a really strong vision that you can actually start to shape and enact. But it's so much work. It's so much more work than I ever thought. And we could have 3 people working here full time, easy, or more. And it's me and a half-time person. And it's just like crazy how much work it is. So I'm looking forward to growing. And I think the part that was most difficult for me and continues to be difficult for me is the financial side. The creative side of actually making the magazine, I feel so good about where we are and what we've done and how we've changed the redesign and the website. Like, the creative side feels awesome. And like this new issue, and we're doing some thematic issues this year. Like, Jen, our managing editor, is amazing and really on it, getting new writers, like all kinds of good things. The financial side of making it work is a different story. And it's true not just for us, tiny little it's true for all media companies right now, big and small. The biggest one's probably getting hurt the most. Layoffs every week. I'm reading all those trade magazines, like publications shutting down. A lot of it's because of redundancy. We don't need Vogue and Glamour and like a lot of those are struggling because they're all the same. So we're kind of cushioned by being unique and regional and niched in with our audience. But it's still very difficult to be only funded by advertising. So we are actively pursuing other forms of revenue. Other sources.
So do you feel like that at this point in the reality of publishing, that it's not reasonable to expect advertising to carry the whole ship?
I would like for it not to. I would like to relieve some of that pressure, both to sell ads and also to be totally ad funded. And this is maybe getting way into things, but to be...
Let's get way into things.
To be, for a media company to be free, we're free on the streets for our readers. I want to keep it that way. And our first obligation should always be to our readers. However, financially, our first obligation appears to fall to our advertisers. And that's bad for media, because if we only wrote about our advertisers, we would be completely irrelevant to our readers. So we have to walk this line. And I love the advertisers we have right now are so into what we're doing. And that's why they're doing business with us.
Yeah.
They get it and they respect it. So this is not at all about our current roster. But I think it's a dynamic, like a power dynamic, that we need to keep in check. And need to continue to cultivate that respect, both from our readers and our advertisers. And I think if people get it, and like I said, our people do, it just makes it so much higher quality for our readers. So we're looking at ways that we can allow our readers to contribute and also get something in return. I don't know if I'll go into the details just yet, but we'd like to launch something this year where readers can start to fund us as well.
That's great. I mean, it's a lot of these paradigms are just shifting. Everything is changing in our society, and I think to think that, like, you know, you can rely on an old model now in a lot of different arenas. It's just not possible. You know, the way that information spreads, the way that people consume information, the way that, you know, relationships are made, it's all up in the air.
Totally.
And yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's, you know, I had that experience too with Arts Houston. Was, you know, we would, you know, have advertisers that'd be like, where's my review? Totally. Where's my article? And it's not that I didn't want, like you said, it's not like I didn't want to give them press. It's just, it was for the readers, right? Like I didn't want to be beholden to the advertisers in that way. I wanted to support the advertisers in the way that they were supporting us, but they couldn't dictate the way that editorial is. And I think, you know, there's a lot of, you know, the big name magazines that are out there, it's all they do.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know, that's not really journalism.
No, definitely not. And I think there's this idea of that an art magazine maybe isn't journalistic or something. I mean, we're not, you know, the New York Times. We're doing hard reporting and investigative journalism. Yeah. But again, the highest calling is to be honest and to show that respect and be as objective as possible. And we can't do that if you're just catering to the advertising crew. So I think there's a way forward. I'm really optimistic. And the New York Times is now majority funded by subscriptions of like a year ago. Really? For the first time in years and years and years. Whoa. So it's not just us. It's like ad revenue is going down, and it's not a model that makes sense. So yeah, we're gonna need help. Yeah. From our readers. Yeah. And we want to do that in a way that also provides value back and also keeps it free for the people who can't, you know, contribute. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think being regional and being a community-focused publication gives us a lot to work with. We're not just about a magazine. There's actually a lot more we can do. So I'm excited. Great. And having a physical space is part of that. We can welcome people in and do events and have shows, and it's like the first step that we've taken toward this new model.
That's so awesome. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah. More days are fun than not. At the beginning, it was the other way around. Right. 3 years ago, not so much.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So one question that I'll kind of have as like a through line through each episode is, can you think of a piece of art, whether it's visual, performance, music, that changed you? Is there anything that sticks out in your mind that is something that you saw and either changed the way you think about something, made you change a direction in your life, or expanded your vision in some way?
Can it be a class I took?
Sure.
Because I don't think there's just one artwork or experience. But in college, like I'd said, I went to school anticipating that I would go into film. And I took a medieval art history course. And it was mostly early medieval work. And my mind was just blown by this class. And I think the thing that really did it for me was the early medieval relationship with images and the way images were used to create culture, to manipulate people, to educate people. All of the ways images were used were totally mind-blowing to me. And that did it. I was like, forget film. Who cares about that? There's more important things out there that we can learn about humans through images, through time. And for a long time, I hated anything that was contemporary. I was like solidly medieval and Renaissance. Like that's all I cared about because I really liked having that long view of history and being able to look back at what has stood the test of time, so to speak. And I think I have different feelings about that now, but I was just really struck by the culture around images in the Middle Ages. And that's what did it.
Cool.
Yeah, it changed my life.
Nice. And when was that?
Professor Gerstel.
Professor Gerstel, shout out. When was that?
That was in college. That was like my sophomore year of college at UCLA.
Did that make you change majors or something? Or?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I declared art history after that, and was like solid medieval. And then I went to grad school also for early medieval.
Wow.
And then I sort of had this is getting off topic. I had this like crisis in grad school where I was like, this is completely irrelevant to the world. And I don't really feel that way, but the audience for medieval art, even in academic circles, is so small. And I felt like I was just in the library, me and this audience of like 10 people focused on the same thing globally. And I'm like, what is this? What am I doing with my life? And so I ended up, after doing my master's, not doing a PhD. And then I started working contemporary art. And now I own an art magazine. That's the short story.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's a real pleasure. And
thanks for having me.
And taking a risk on my brand new baby podcast.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks.